Welcome to DefenseTech TV, accelerating mission technologies across all domains, sponsored by HII Mission Technologies. One of the platforms the Department of Defense will use to connect its warfighters with each other and with allies and partners is the Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control Platform. The department calls CJADC2 a roadmap to connecting people with data and information. At DefenseTech Live, Garry Schwartz, Chief Operating Officer at HII Mission Technologies, explains how DoD can connect all those pieces and why the three big pieces of success will be trust, flexibility, and AI.
Well, CJADC2, and first you really got to say JADC2 first, right? So JADC2, think about that on the U.S. only side. And then the C is the combined, or think of that as your coalition partners, right, that are brought in to an extent, depending on who they are. Because, the U.S. doesn't really go to war alone very often. That is a warfighting concept overall, JADC2. So it's not a thing, it's not a system. And at best, you describe it as it's a suite of capabilities in many cases that are still on a drawing board, still in PowerPoint, hoped for. And a lot of the underlying capabilities and technologies exist, but you got to bring them together. And you'll hear people talk a lot about the data fabric or the data mesh and underpinning everything. And once you have that, and you can trust everything, and you get the data from where A to B, where it needs to go, and everything will be solved. Artificial intelligence will make all the decisions or speed those decisions up. The part that I worry about, and maybe it's because of my history, but the part I worry about is how do you get the right data to the right systems? Because humans have an ability to adapt to different information, but systems only work as they were built. And most of our systems weren't built to work in a truly net-centric fashion. So a lot of the work today is about working individual threads, from system A to system B to system C, decision makers in the loop in there. And what we need is to be many to many, and whatever the circumstances require. And so there's a lot of work, and I think artificial intelligence can help with that, but there's a lot of work on how do I translate? How do I robustly provide the information that a system needs? You might need 6 pieces of information if you're system X. I might need only 5. You send me the 6, I don't know what to do with it. I might choke. I might need a whole lot more than you do. And I need it in a different, if you will, language, not a computer language, but I need different elements in different formats.
To that idea of looking at the broader problem, where does one start, in your view, to look at that broader problem? Is it the interoperability? Is it the data standards about how the data transits from place to place and from service to service, from U.S. to ally and partner?
So the old way we used to solve problems is tight control, strict standards, right? And everybody got on board. Except what we realized is that's not how we buy things in the U.S. military. An individual program manager might not get any money to tie into certain joint interoperability, or maybe the first thing gets cut when things, when money gets tight. And so standards have not really proven to be very successful. And then we built really rigid gateways. Okay, you speak French, I speak English. I'm going to work that gateway translating between systems, but that's still very manual, very much point to point. I think the idea of and you could argue the point, data mesh or data fabric, coupled with artificial intelligence that understands what all the different systems need, that can see what's available at a point in time in the network, and then move the information to where it needs to go. And by the way, deal with the fact that sometimes it's looking for the node that was there just a moment ago, and now it's dropped off. Lost satellite communications, right? Or somehow otherwise disappeared from the network. And then all of a sudden, by the way, surprises you later, pops back in 10 minutes later. So how do you deal with all of that? And you have to deal with that at speed, and you have to deal with networks that have a lot of porosity to them. And I think artificial intelligence, coupled with what we're seeing now as great compute capabilities, is going to help you overcome that. So I would say we're probably to the place for the first time in my lifetime where it's less about standards and it's more about having these kinds of automatic abilities within AI ML to be able to work the translation because they know what's needed. And they can recognize when a system joins a network that system needs this information. Do I have it? Is it the right, as well as is it the right system and how we typically think about it. So I think we're there, and I think we can do that by focusing on that as a solution versus more standards. Right?
One of the ways that you're supporting the goal that you just laid out there is the Mission Partner Environment Initiative. How does that get the department to the vision that you just laid out for JADC2?
Right. Well, the mission partner environment is really that part of the system that really puts the C on the JADC2, right? So that's the coalition, or combined is what that C stands for. And so that mission partner environment is going to provide the ability for the transfer of data, from JADC2 to our coalition partners, and potentially bring information from the coalition partners back into JADC2. And so, recently we've been asked to, work with DoD in supporting that effort. And we have a platform we built called Ionic that's a cloud-based, large data platform for exchanging information, a data fabric, if you will. And so that's what we're going to help them with. And hopefully we'll be able to extend that into some of the other areas.
Garry Schwartz of HII Mission Technologies. Securing the systems and data that underpin CJADC2 will be necessary for warfighting dominance, according to leaders in the Pentagon. Rear Admiral Dennis Velez, U.S. Navy, the acting deputy commander of U.S. Cyber Command, explains how the recently completed Cyber Guard exercise prepares the joint force for cyber combat today, not 10 years from now.
For us, Cyber Guard 25 TAC 2 is our command level exercise. It is part of the Elite Constellation Joint Forces exercises that the chairman directs, and it is a global exercise. It was in coordination with multiple COCOMs, in particular INDOPACOM. So INDOPACOM was executing their Pacific Century exercise, and Cyber Guard was one of the supporting exercises for that major headquarters level exercise. Learned lots of lessons. Just this past week, the Secretary of Defense elevated one of our component commanders, formerly known DODN headquarters, to now the Department of Defense Cyber Defense Command. So we were testing new C2 structure. How is that command going to be able to defend the Department of Defense infrastructure across the United States, globally? As you know, we have 32,000 plus networks in the department, and we're charged with defending those networks. So how are we going to do that on their new C2 architecture? How are we going to use AI to ensure that our operators have the capacity to defend against adversaries at a global scale? How are we going to ensure that our operations are supporting kinetic operations in a theater of war, and to ensure that the timing and tempo of those operations support kinetic operations on land, at sea, or in the air? So lots of lessons. I thought it was a very successful event for the command. We are now dissecting all those lessons.
There's a word that you didn't use, but I'm hearing a lot at this conference that I imagine is especially applicable to what you just described, and that's interoperability.
Interoperability is key to everything that we do, and that's why I think, that's why I know that they're forcing the combatant commands to exercise together. When I was a young officer, combatant commands and service will execute exercises in silos, and you will go on and do an exercise in the Pacific, and it was just the Indo-Pacific forces that operated. But we know today that at the level that we are going to be competing in executing combat ops, is going to be at a global scale. So we need the entirety of the joint force. We fight as a joint force. We don't fight as individual services or individual COCOM. So it is critical for us to integrate, to ensure, again, that our plans are well synchronized, that what effects that we think we are creating support the end states of those supported commanders that we are in, that they're in the fight. So critical, not just again for the uniform side of the house, but also how do we synchronize with industry? How do we synchronize with our local, state, national governments in terms of, for us, in Cyber Command, in terms how do we protect critical infrastructure in the nation? How do we ensure that we, as a command, as a DoD, protect and defend those elements that are most critical for the fight?
A lot of discussion at this conference about the technologies that are impacting cyber and technology today. Two of those that a lot of people are discussing here, artificial intelligence and high power computing. Quantum is what is on people's minds. How are you approaching either or both of those concepts at Cyber Command?
AI is foundational. We're using AI today. So our operators are utilizing AI tools, not just to do back office work, but also do operations. And we're looking at ways to how do we free up our operators from some of the mundane work they do in terms of cyber defense, and allow an AI bot to manage traffic, see what techniques our adversaries using, and develop AI agents that can help us identify those things at scale. So the command is heavily invested. We have an AI task force that is being run by our Cyber National Mission Force. So the commander of Cyber National Mission Force has an AI task force that they're tasked by the commander to be on a continuous DevOps of AI projects and capabilities. So every 90 days, they report back to General Hartman on the capabilities they've tested, the ones that they see value and they want to continue to develop, the ones that are not ready for prime time, we're going to send back to industry, or the ones that we think that with some tweaks we'll be able to use in the future, and we'll provide that feedback. That's our commitment. That we cannot do this alone. We 100% need our industry partners to be alongside with us.
Rear Admiral Dennis Velez of U.S. Cyber Command. The leaders that are moving data and security to where warfighters will be in conflict speak regularly about computing at the edge. That edge can be anywhere a warfighter needs to make a decision. John Bell, Chief Technology Officer at HII Mission Technologies, unpacks moving technologies like agentic AI, autonomy, and quantum computing to the edge, and what the department should focus on now and in the coming decade.
I don't think we've seen this much technology change in warfighting since, I would say, since the advent of smart weapons, when we stopped dropping dumb iron bombs. One of the biggest factors going into this is the advent of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we've already seen how useful those tools can be. We've also seen how sometimes they don't work the way we expect them to. So it's a real challenge. But AI, ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning, is really going into every aspect of the warfighter. Weapon systems, sensors, the way we process command and control information, the way we identify targets, the way we gather intelligence, all of it is happening much more efficiently due to the use of AI, ML. So I would say that's the first thing that's really driving change for the warfighter. The next one is really autonomy. Autonomous systems is a generic label for what we normally consider to be things like drones, maybe uncrewed underwater vehicles, UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. All of those systems have begun to become much more effective for warfighting because of autonomy. They don't have to be explicitly controlled by an operator with a stick and throttle. You program a mission for them, you hit go, and they go off and they do it. In many cases, autonomous systems can be cheap. Maybe they're built off of commercial systems that you could go buy on the open market with a few changes. So in those cases, those systems can be throwaway systems.
It sounds like the next generation of warfighting will involve, and that's the concept of agentic AI, and it sounds like that's what you've just described. Am I on the right track there?
Yes, agentic AI in particular is very interesting, not only from the perspective of controlling autonomous systems like drones, but from the perspective of performing tasks that traditionally human warfighters would perform. Well, we have a lot of actions that are performed by humans of the loop, working as a team, collaborating with each other, talking to each other. If we can insert these artificial intelligence agents to either replace them or supplement them, perhaps they could do experiments with each other and then give the staff some new answers they hadn't thought of, or maybe quickly help them discard unlikely courses of action that won't work out well. So AI agents really are not about replacing people. the way we all fear it will happen. Ultimately, they're about supplementing people, helping them to do their job much better. That may mean that what you did as a job before is entirely being replaced by that AI agent, but it means that you're going to be a more capable performer of that work because now you effectively have an AI agent doing that work for you.
What should the department be doing today to be prepared to integrate these things as quickly as you suggested a moment ago?
There's some really foundational work that DoD needs to address. First, we need to address the problem of data. AI/ML is 100% reliant on data to function properly. And when we talk about data, we're not just talking about little bits, dribs, and drabs of data. We are talking about lots and lots of data, petabytes of data. The generic term in the industry is big data. Our company has products that specifically are in wide use by DoD for managing big data. And we believe that it's really critical that we start to apply that technology across all of the various areas of DoD that are managing data. One of the big challenges is actually not a technical challenge, it's a policy challenge. If we want our AI/ML systems to be able to access all this data, then we have to authorize that. And we have to figure out a way to make all these stovepipe systems talk to each other. So systems like our big data platform allow us to do this, to really integrate all those data stores and bring them together and to address big problems like multiple levels of classification, sharing secret data with non-secret partners at an appropriate level. Another big area is in command and control. Our company has a very advanced command and control system that we see being very applicable to JADC2. And that system is used by the government already. And we'd really like to see that much more widely used beyond the Navy across DoD because it's a really effective solution to that problem.
John Bell of HII Mission Technologies. Military leaders agree that AI and autonomy are powerful tools. One of the goals those leaders are aiming for is integrating them into workflows in every domain. Jennifer Edgen, Assistant Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare N2N6, explains how the Navy's approach to electronic warfare does just that.
Electronic warfare for the Navy is all about how we use the electromagnetic spectrum for our strategic advantage. So that means, how do we use the spectrum to degrade, deny, deceive, and disrupt our adversary and protect ourselves at the same time? Now, this can be a little bit of an esoteric concept for folks because you can't really see the electromagnetic spectrum unless you use a prism and then you can only see a portion of it. So when you think about how we use the spectrum, it's those set of capabilities that allow us to disrupt information flow and provide ourselves a strategic advantage, thereby giving us more survivable platforms and more options for our commanders.
What are the important elements of what you're doing to for what those warfighters need on the front lines, and how is that continuing to evolve, Jennifer?
So much like you see in many of our technology disciplines right now, EW is a heavily technology-focused area. So I like to think of things as an ecosystem. I'll use the biology example of everything in our ecosystem is interconnected. So we want to have a strong, robust R&D apparatus. We want to have strong teaming with our partners and allies. Because when we look at how we deliver capabilities to our sailors, it begins with design informed by R&D, design informed by the commercial picture, design informed by the threat picture. Then as we deploy those technologies, we want to be able to do it rapidly. And we want to be able to respond to changes that may be occurring, whether it be in peacetime or wartime. We want to make sure that we can provide the most relevant information and capabilities to the sailors right when they need them. Mm-hmm. And lastly, when it comes to disposal, eventually, things need to be upgraded or disposed of. So it's an entire life cycle. And at each stage of that, there's options to learn, options to continuously improve, and options to grow.
The difficulty that it strikes me that you run into is that as rapidly as the technology that sits around the things that you're talking about is changing, integrating that into the workflows that you're trying to provide for warfighters becomes more and more difficult. How do you tackle that challenge
So if I could sum it up in one sentence, it's begin with the end in mind. And so this really becomes a foundational design principle. So when you talk about an individual technology, well, if you think, how would a sailor use that? How would a decision maker use that? That increases the robustness of your design. It isn't just this, random object that you're trying to find a home for. It's something that's built into your entire decision-making cycle. That allows you to develop a much better product. So it's really, harnessing those design thinking principles that you see in the commercial space and applying them to our military space.
I imagine EW does not exist in a vacuum, nor do you want it to. What does the connective tissue look like?
Things aren't stovepiped anymore. When you look at a decision a cycle or that observe, orient, detect, and act loop, you want to make sure that you have a multi-domain view of the situation. So you want to be able to combine your EW knowledge with things in your ISR space or things in some of your other intelligence spaces. That multidisciplined approach yields much stronger outcomes and decisions.
And I imagine keeping that in top of mind gets you out of the situation where you're saying, hey, AI is pretty cool. We should figure out some way to use AI without really thinking about the use case going into it.
Right. And if I could add a little bit more to that, when we talk about AI, an important question that I ask sailors is, what do you want a computer to do for you? Because if you think and you study how sailors perform missions, you see a lot of sailors spending a lot of time sorting through data. Now, I don't know about you, but I want to spend my time figuring out what that data means. So if we can use AI-enabled tools to assist our sailors and decision makers, that's the sweet spot. Computers are good at sifting through large amounts of things very quickly. Humans are good at interpreting what that means and making decisions.
The Navy's Jennifer Edgen. Both government and industry officials list each other as some of their most important partners in solving warfighting challenges. Government leaders say they rely on industry partners for innovation, and they're warning that they'll push industry for faster delivery of warfighting solutions. Grant Hagan, president of Warfare Systems at HII Mission Technologies, describes how industry's working side by side with users in real-world exercises.
Within Mission Technologies, we really focus on getting capability in the hands of the warfighter as quickly as possible. So what you see today at the DefenseTech Live is a lot of those products we've built alongside the warfighter, getting continuous feedback to incorporate to solve their problems, and that's really where we're focused. Is how do we identify the problem, support the warfighter, and then get that technology and capability in their hands quickly. With a continuous feedback loop as well.
What have you seen from your side, and what have you seen the department do to facilitate that drive for speed?
Yeah, so I think they're doing a great job. You've seen a transition to more and more of the exercises. So as we develop capability, we try and get them scheduled into an exercise and get the hands-on from the end user to get that feedback, to iterate, and then to improve the capability. Eventually then leading to potentially a program of record or procurement of that system if it's needed. Otherwise, we will move on to solve other problems for the customer.
What I think is interesting about that is, for years, industry asked for that latitude. The department seemed to struggle with that and wanted to give you a list of requirements. It has to do these 20 things. It sounds like that culture has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. That culture has changed. You used to get a long list of requirements. You'd put a bid in, and usually that would increase cost and increase the time to product delivery. So with that iteration and not being completely specific on the requirements, it allows our company and others to bring solutions into their hands quickly and not going against a performance spec or a large specification that you go through a huge testing process.
One of the arguments in industry made for a long time about that is it won't lock us into having to respond in a particular way. Have you seen that bear out?
Absolutely, absolutely. We will. You will get requirements that come in, and that's what we want. Once you get that baseline solution, then you want that feedback to increase the capability. So you'll get some specific requirements after you get that baseline solution for them, and then you'll and we really employ DevSecOps. So doing it quickly, securely, with continuous integration, continuous security for that warfighter.
Has the iteration process proved to be to provide any challenges to you or to the department as you try something, maybe it doesn't work exactly the way that you hoped?
I think it's evolving, but what we have to be cognizant of, if we get it in their hands and it's not something that's solving a problem, don't bring it back and continue to iterate on something that isn't necessarily solving their needs. You got to move on to the next idea and thought of how to, or methodology to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the discussion at this conference revolves around integration. How does that emphasis on integration from the department inform the way that you go about doing your work to try to support it?
You know, we had a session on CJADC2. That is all about integrating various stovepipe capabilities into a unified command and control solution. And that's kind of a template of, you got to bring not only integrate these products that are existing, integrate new products. There's going to be multiple vendors that provide those products, so you all have to play well together. And then in the end, they have to integrate their coalition partners as well and their capabilities. So it all has to mesh together. You have to have translators along the way to provide that integration. But if you know integration is occurring up front, you can design for integration. You can get those standards up front. Work with the customer to develop a standard so you know that you're interfacing correctly with them.
What are the most effective ways to do that, to know going into a project like you just described? You said integration up front. Okay, once you know that, how do you effectively plan to make sure that you're able to deliver what the customer wants?
Yeah, I'll use software as an example. If the government defines in advance, which is one thing that they're getting better at, but getting that interface document to the vendors for them to build to really helps. The other thing, once you get in there, you can actually get your hands on what you need to do, and you can make those iterations quickly using a DevSecOps model.
Mm-hmm. Just final thought, what can you do to help the department the most, not tactically, but maybe strategically or even philosophically? What will be the greatest benefit that you can do to help them achieve the goals that we've talked about in this conversation, do you think?
I think just being open to the changing landscape, being open to provide technology, and really focus on get that technology in the hands of the warfighter quickly. Speed is of essence.
Grant Hagan of HII Mission Technologies. Thanks for watching DefenseTech TV, accelerating mission technologies across all domains, sponsored by HII Mission Technologies. If you missed any part of this program, or you'd like to see more conversations with military and industry leaders, you can watch on demand at DefenseTech.tv. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for watching.